After 2 miscarriages, each just a year apart from the other, Sandra was incredibly happy to have finally made it to the delivery room, finally anticipating the melodies of a baby's cry, her baby's cry. Alas, disappointment was something she seemingly just had to get used to. Her baby did not cry. "Don't worry, Sandra, she's breathing. She'll be okay," said the nurse. But Sandra wanted to give up. She wanted a perfect baby, a healthy baby. She knew this baby was going to take her through a ride, one that she was not willing to go on. Little Cassie was kept in the incubator for 3 excruciatingly long months. All Sandra could do was try her best to get through each day, taking life one step at a time. That's how life worked either way. If you were to take life all at once, you would find yourself in crumbles. Eventually, Cassie's health improved. It was now time to take her back home. Sandra's husband, Mark, was delighted at the news. Mark was an incredibly supportive gentleman who has dreamed of being a good father. His goal was to be to someone what his father was to him, or even better. He was eagerly looking forward to finally bringing up his little angel, something he had been anticipating for years. The two of them, Sandra and Mark, had been through much, beginning with their marriage initially being frowned upon by Mark's father, then Sandra's miscarriages. It had taken them a while, but soon, Mark's parents warmed up with Sandra, understanding that the situation she was in was most definitely not her fault, and she was much more competent than what they thought. Life had taken its toll on them, but they were strong and ready to take on a new chapter in their lives. Mark brought Cassie home and walked over to his and Sandra's room. He found her in tears, as expected. Mark smiled weakly at Sandra, as he did every day, but for the first time, she returned the smile he had fallen in love with when they had met in university. Mark was drawn to her the moment he saw her. It wasn't just how beautiful she was, but something more intangible. A warmth emanated from her every move, and her smile, in particular, seemed to glow with an inner luminosity. He knew right away that this woman was special. No one else came close to possessing such a spark of life within them like she did. To him, it felt like they were soulmates destined to be together forever. The way she moved, spoke, and smiled had illuminated something deep within his soul that he never knew was missing until then. It broke his heart when she lost that spark after the 2 miscarriages. But here she was, smiling again, weakly, but smiling. Cassie was deaf. Sandra and Mark knew this would be nothing like bringing up any ordinary child, but weren't willing to lose hope in the belief that their child was someone special who would grow up to live a successful life, just as any other parent would like to believe. Sandra's and Mark's parents were not the slightest bit affected by their granddaughter's disability. The expression of pure joy and happiness when they came home to meet her for the first time is proof enough of it. They could not take their eyes off her. So immense was their love. Their smiles spread from ear to ear, an almost permanent feature that they could not suppress. They finally held their grandchild in their arms, a moment they have been waiting for ever since Sandra and Mark got married. Both Sandra and Mark had no siblings, so Cassie was the first and only grandchild to the grandparents from both sides. Her existence was one they treasured and deemed an immense blessing. Cassie's first birthday was one Sandra would never forget. The overexcited grandparents put together a grand celebration, inviting relatives that Sandra and Mark had barely met. Among these guests were a few older ladies whose mindsets were even more ancient than themselves. From friends to their third cousins, everyone was made aware. The party began, and all present were so happy and filled with joy to share with the blessed family. The presents brought by the guests were piling up to the size of a mini hill. Little Cassie, though, was only interested in the lollipops, chocolates, and anything that looked bright and shiny. The day went on, the grandparents seeming to have the time of their lives. "Oh, Agnes, do you remember how Sandra would always score less than my Charlie in school? She's always been quite behind. Explains why she was incapable of bringing a normal human being to our family," said Mrs. Smith. not realizing Sandra was approaching her to offer her a glass of drink. Throughout the party, Sandra continuously heard similar remarks. Her spirit was slowly crushed. She was fighting to hold back tears whilst cutting Cassie's birthday cake. Mark, realizing, ensured the guests did not stay over longer than necessary and sent them away in as hospitable of a way as humanly possible, being the gentleman he was. See, that was something Sandra never had, being able to sweet talk. She was like fire, rough, burning, sharp on the edges. Mark, on the other hand, was less rash than her, always calculated situations, understood them well, and acted accordingly. It's no wonder everyone loved him, no matter where he was. The following week was one of extreme difficulty for Sandra, her self-esteem almost non-existent after the party. She told herself that she was a failure, a disappointment. However, that only strengthened her to give it her all to ensure Cassie was not. That Cassie would be an individual who excels in life. She decided to dedicate every bit of her being to make sure her daughter would be everything she wasn't. To prove the world, society, that she was not anything less than any other person, just because of her disability. The fruits of Sandra's efforts soon began to grow. They grew on a large tree, their colors bright and evident, proof which was undeniable. She enrolled Cassie in a school for special needs children. Cassie was the best in her class. Her teacher, so impressed that she asked Sandra if Cassie really was deaf. Sandra had made it her goal to ensure Cassie's disability would not limit her. Mark and her enrolled themselves in multiple courses for parents of children with disabilities, implementing every exercise possible, training Cassie, preparing her for the world. The principal of Cassie's school asked for Sandra and Mark to meet her. Sandra's mind began to overthink. Everything had been going so well. Was this finally the point where it goes downhill, just as it always does in her seemingly cursed life? "Good morning. Would you like some tea before we get into it?" asked the principal, with a sweet smile on her face. "No, we're quite all right, thank you. What's wrong, Miss Kimberly? Has Cassie done something? Is everything okay?" said Mark, voicing out what Sandra was worrying about, she not being able to speak them herself. Sandra shook her leg repetitively and bit on her nails due to the anxiousness. "Yes, not to worry. Things are more than okay, actually. Your daughter might be the most remarkable kid I've ever met. She picks up on what's taught so fast, incredibly interested in all lessons. It's almost as if she does not possess a disability of any kind. You two have done a marvelous job in nurturing and bringing up your, I must say, gifted daughter." Sandra was in shock. Her jaw gradually dropped throughout the conversation, tears shining through her eyes, suddenly filling up with life and color. All their efforts truly were not in vain. Miss Kimberly, observant of her reaction, carried on. "I have a suggestion. You don't have to comply by it, but if you do, my assistance is guaranteed. I have approached the Kinsley Elementary School and explained your daughter's circumstances to them. They are more than willing to allow Cassie to continue her studies with them. I just very strongly feel like she has the potential to excel in life, but not if she stays here. Our school was established to help the differently abled to grant them access to basic education. I fear allowing your daughter to stay here would greatly limit her capabilities. As her parents, what do you have to say to this?" Sandra stared at the principal for several moments, her eyes blinking slowly as she attempted digesting the entire situation. Thankfully, Mark spoke instead of her, because if not for her, they would have probably ended up looking like a fish out of water. "I'm genuinely at a loss for words. This is quite a surprise. A pleasant one, of course, but I'm sure that Cassie, too, would like for some time to think about this and get back to you. We thank you sincerely for the help and the genuine concern you have for our daughter," replied Mark, his voice confident. She took a long look at her husband, watching the emotions flicker on his face, and she couldn't help the feeling of warmth that spread in her chest. Sitting before the school principal, Sandra felt a happiness bloom inside of her like nothing she had ever experienced before. The news that Cassie was doing well made all of the hard work worthwhile. All those occasions when they had to handle society's stigmas, the discouragement they encountered from other people, it had all paid off. They were now reaping the rewards of their dedication and sacrifice. It wasn't just their hard work, it was Cassie's too. A wave of guilt washed over Sandra as she thought back to the day when she thought she could never love Cassie. But now everything was so different. Now Cassie was her entire world. Cassie began schooling at the Kinsley Elementary School a month later. Now this remarkable family was faced with yet another trial. Cassie fell victim to bullying. She had been so used to being surrounded by those just like her and being the best in class. The switch to being the odd one out and now among the more average set of students, she had to learn to adapt. That was just how life worked. You had to learn to adapt, move forth, get stronger, and come out as a better version of yourself. Indeed, Cassie did just that. She slowly grew to fit in, and the bullying ceased. She soon became the star of her class, and when it came down to academics, she outperformed everyone else at such a young age. Sandra was sure they had made the right decision after all. They pushed her into sports too. Swimming, specifically, was Cassie's favorite. Cassie had a special connection with the water. Every time she dove beneath the surface and into the familiar embrace of her aquatic world, she felt completely transformed. The feeling of gliding through the depths in total control, like a dolphin discovering new spaces, was something that was truly unique to her. Indeed, while it is true that her parents initially pushed her to take up swimming, it soon became obvious that this wasn't just another duty or obligation in her life. This was something that Cassie actually wanted to do. Something that made her feel alive, energized, and connected with a greater sense of unity. In short, every practice session only deepened Cassie's love for the water and for swimming overall. The couple had done what was best for their daughter, something every parent should strive for with their children. Provide them with every opportunity available so that they can excel to their highest potential and live out a meaningful life. It is this selflessness that makes parenting such an honorable profession. Despite all odds, Cassie's struggle were overcome by her parents' unconditional love and support, as well as her own courage, perseverance, and determination.